Hi, my name's Annie Shen, and I'm a principal consultant with Enverus. Today, I'll be presenting a workflow in Prism on our Landtrac lease dataset, looking at how to identify leases that have just expired or are expiring soon, how to view leases that are held by production, how to color by debt severance types, and how to identify if there is intent to drill in a certain region. So starting off on our default Prism page, we do see our map on the left side, our scatter plot on the top right, our bubble widget on the bottom, as well as our row widget in the middle. I'm going to go ahead and delete these particular widgets out as we won't be using them in today's workflow. From here, we will be concentrating in on the Permian. So on my map, holding the Shift button and clicking and dragging to zoom in to my area of interest, I can zoom in into the Permian. Because I know which basin I'm working in, I will go ahead and duplicate these out and start to change them to view other metrics in Prism. So I'll change to Enverus operator, reflecting the operators with the most well records within this region and saving that one up. The second one, changing it to interval, indicating which wells are targeting which intervals in the subsurface. And then this third one, changing it to well status, so that we can see whether these wells are producing, whether they're permitted, whether they're drilled, and so on and so forth. And saving that one up as well. So from this point, the default is the wells and the laterals on my map. You may be wondering what this blue color is. If I pop open my legend below, I can see that all of them are reflecting by the region. I will actually go ahead and toggle these two views off. Don't worry, we'll bring them back on in just a second. And turn on my Landtrac lease so we can see this pretty clearly. The default color by is the state code. We will color by expiration of the term today and go ahead and set that to quarter. We will see a patchwork quilt within the map area, mainly because we haven't restricted this to any kind of vintage of a lease age. So in order to restrict to a lease date, I can come over into my sidebar, drop down into Landtrac lease dataset to start filtering by the Landtrac lease. So I'll click into the expiration of primary term, and I can fill out any kind of date that I see as a preference, or I can use my quick filter button, which is what I'm going to use today. So you can identify here any of those leases that have expired recently, say within the last 7 days. I'm going to go ahead and use leases that are expiring within the future, looking at leases that are expiring from today's date on into that next year. So coming back out into my map, I do see that reflected in my map, with the lightest colors being the leases that are expiring the soonest, and then the darkest being the ones that are expiring at a later date. So coming into this North Oil area in the northern Delaware, again, holding that Shift button, clicking and dragging in to see my lease acreage area, I can see all these lease spots and click on them to bring up a short lease card. When I click on that particular lease area, I do see it in green highlighted on my map. We are also given the grantee alias, the grantor, the record date of that lease, any kind of areas that we've seen in the expiration of that term. Of course, some of these areas do have multiple leases laying on them, so I can come through and toggle to other lease areas within this region and see what they look like in relation to the royalty, the acreage area, and again, the related expiration of primary term. So from there, in order to start identifying whether some of these leases may be held by production, I can come back into my edit order layers and toggle on my wells and my laterals. Pulling this to the side so I'm actually going to change these over to well status so we can see in green those producing wells. Again, doing the same for wells as we did for our laterals. And we can see within this particular lease acreage area right here, we see one well as that lateral in that green color, meaning these leases that sit within this acreage area right here may be held by production, whereas coming up here into these lease acreage areas, we don't see any wells. We don't see not just producing wells, but we don't see any of those permitted wells within that deep blue color or deep purple color right here, meaning that there may not be intent to start developing those acreage areas. Now, I suspect that they may not have an intention to drill those areas because there's not a permit, but in order to be certain and make sure that we didn't lose any kind of records, or maybe we didn't miss anything, then I can come into here and toggle on my rigs icon in order to show the active rigs within this region. So we do see a few active rigs default colored by those operators that have contracted those rigs. We do see some within this upper region here, as well as over here just west of that lease acreage area, but it doesn't seem like any of those rigs lay on my lease areas, meaning that there probably is not an intention to drill that lease acreage area. So today, to summarize, we covered how to identify leases that have just expired or are expiring soon, how to identify leases that may be potentially held by production, how to identify if there's an intent to drill within a certain region, and then we'll come in and finally show how to color these Landtrac leases by their depth severance type. So coming back into that edit order layers, we'll, instead of coloring by expiration of primary term, we'll come in and type in depth severance type. This is just to show within Texas which leases have a PU clause in them, which leases may have a depth and a PU clause laying within the acreage area, and which leases have just a depth clause. Thank you for attending today's session. Please reach out to PC support at enverus.com if you have any further questions.